Hello friends, it's June wrap-up time. I read a lot more books than I typically do way back in May. I read 9 books and June was more of a regression to the mean because I read 6 books and several of those were on the shorter side of things, but I'm not mad about that. I've been reading more with my eyeballs lately. I've just been struggling with audio and being able to focus on books with audio, so I think that's limited my reading pace a little bit, but I'm not worried about it. It feels like a natural ebb and flow and not some kind of reading slump or anything. I think I just needed a little bit of breathing room to reflect on what I was reading and devote my time to other hobbies, and that's okay. I'm going to start by talking about the books I read, and I will, as I always do, go roughly in order from the books I enjoyed the least to the books I enjoyed the most. And the first book I'm going to talk about is Flirting Lessons by Jasmine Guillory. I'm not a big contemporary romance reader. I don't think I'm particularly familiar enough with the genre and its authors to be great at selecting something that I know I'll like. So I went into this knowing I might not love it, but I wanted to give this a shot as a buzzy new release featuring a queer romance. And that romance is between 2 women who live in Napa, California. Avery is fresh off of a breakup with a long-term boyfriend and wants to explore dating women. She wants to break out of her shell a little bit. Luckily, she meets Taylor, who is a friend of a friend, and Taylor is established in the lesbian community and willing to give Avery flirting lessons. Cue a bunch of date settings that are allegedly not dates between Taylor and Avery, but throughout which it's clear that they are very attracted to each other. I liked the tropiness of that premise. I liked the sort of like fake dating friends to lovers tropes, and I liked some of the themes around friendship here. There's real advice to be found within this book about not just flirting, but finding new friendships and new communities in adulthood. And this book has a lot to say about what it means to be a good friend. But unfortunately, I thought the execution was just a little bit bland. I thought the leads lacked chemistry and their characters were just kind of underdeveloped. But, you know, it was a good low stakes read, very summery vibes. The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong is an interesting one to talk about because I thought the middle third of the book was a 5-star read, but on either side it's bookended by an exposition and a denouement that I would rate 2 stars. I released a video last week where I broke down some of the themes in this book, but it's essentially a military fantasy and coming-of-age story about a mother and son who are both part of a traditional warrior family in the Empire of Kaigen, which is a fantasy Japan sort of deal. And in the end, I thought this was a worthwhile read, but I also thought there were some pretty significant flaws with the pacing and the world building. I found it incredibly difficult to get into at first. Really early on, there is a particularly egregious info dump chapter that is literally framed as a boring history lesson in school, and I was reading it and thinking to myself, like, yeah, this is boring. Why are you making me read this? But when it picks up, it really picks up, and there are very few mother protagonists in fantasy, and I think this is a really great representation of that kind of character. The River Has Roots by Amal El-Matar is a short novella. It's about 130 pages. It's under 4 hours for the audiobook, and that includes a separate short story that appears after the novella. This is a fairy tale retelling of a traditional murder ballad called The Two Sisters. I had to research this because I didn't know about it, but there's different variations on this traditional folk song, and generally one sister drowns another in a river out of jealousy, and when the murdered girl's body comes ashore, someone makes a musical instrument out of it, like a harp that's made out of the bones and the hair, and this harp plays itself and sings about the murder to the town. So this novella offers a more feminist twist on that tale, where we have 2 sisters who live on the border of the fairy world, and their family's mission is to tend to and sing to the magical willows that grow along the banks of the river. And what I liked about this was the fairiness of it all. I liked the strange fairy logic and the puzzles and the wordplay, and the audiobook is incredible. It has real singing and music and sound effects, which enhanced my enjoyment of the book a lot. If you read this, I highly recommend the audiobook. But it sort of stays at this level of fairy tale where the characters are more abstract types than anything. And because of that, I thought it might have worked better compressed into more of a short story than a novella, but it was still beautiful, and I would tell anyone who's curious to read this to just go ahead and spend 3 hours and change to listen to it. I also actually did really love the short story at the end, which was called John Hollowback and the Witch, and was apparently a preview for an upcoming short story collection. So I'm definitely still on board with Amal El-Mahtar and plan to check that short story collection out when it's released. Exit Strategy by Martha Wells is the 4th novella in the Murderbot Diaries series. This was my favorite novella since the first one, in large part because it revisits many of the characters that we met in that first novella, and you get to see how Murderbot negotiates trust with them after having left them for a period of time to go on its own adventures. And I don't have a lot to say about the 4th book in a series in this venue, but I'm really still enjoying it, and they're potentially getting better as we get deeper into the story and the themes and the relationships in this series. I'm also still really enjoying the TV series. The last couple episodes have been quite exciting. I think the season finale is coming up next week. On the Calculation of Volume, Volume 1 by Solveig Balla was a really enjoyable literary sci-fi time travel read. I've said this before, but I am a sucker for a time travel story. I think the themes time travel invites about cause and effect and memory and nostalgia and curiosity and free will. All of these things are things I find really appealing, and I will just eat them up in a time travel story. And this book has a Groundhog Day premise where our protagonist is a young woman named Tara who is reliving the same day, November 18th, over and over again. But it approaches that premise in a really refreshing, new to me way. When the book starts, Tara is already on day 120 something, and she's writing down what the days have been like up until now. And she has a husband who at first she would tell him what she was going through. She's like, hey, I'm reliving the same day over and over again. And the refreshing thing is that he would believe her. He would always try to help her. He was concerned about her. But as more time is passing for her and it's not passing for him, she's starting to feel more isolated and distant from him, and she's at this point avoiding him. And while Tara is possibly the most boring person to ever experience a time loop, I thought the way the book uses this time loop as a device to explore distance and complacency and transition in a relationship was really thought-provoking. And this is only the first book in what will be a septology, so I'm really intrigued to see where it goes. I just thought it was a really unique, lovely book. And the final book I finished in the month of June is Disappoint Me by Nicola Dinan. This book is about a 30-year-old trans woman named Max who works as a lawyer by day and a poet by night, and she begins dating a cis man named Vincent who is also a lawyer, who lives far outside of the queer, artsy circles Max runs in, but who is kind and attentive to her and has Max thinking about what she wants from a relationship and what she wants out of her life. The story is told in a dual POV, dual timeline style where we alternate between Max in the present day and Vincent when he is 19, traveling in his gap year before he starts college. And I think Dinan does a really great job of giving these two narrators really distinct and believable voices. And as the novel develops and their relationship develops, The book really converges on these themes of forgiveness and acceptance, and I just thought that it was a really powerful read, and Dinan makes really compelling observations about modern relationships, both here and in Bellies, her debut novel that I read last year. And I would just be really interested. I'm really excited at whatever Nicola Dinan publishes next. In terms of movies, June was fine. I don't know, there weren't any real standouts, but I feel like the movies are sort of doing what they're supposed to do in their genre. They're all fine. I just find it a little bit hard to rank them for this month. But I'll start with Mission Impossible, which I actually watched in theaters twice because I saw it once on my own and then I went to go see it again with a friend, which is not something I would have done if I had to pay for a movie ticket. But if you've been watching a while, you know my sister works at the movie theater, so I don't need to pay to see most movies in the movie theater. But even though I watched it twice, I still don't really have a lot to say about this one. It's Mission Impossible. The writing was not good, but you're not there for the writing. You're there for the two major action set pieces. It felt a little bloated, but sometimes you will sit through 2 hours of a movie to see Tom Cruise's face flapping in the wind as he hangs off of a biplane. In the vein of action movies, I also saw the F1 movie starring Brad Pitt, and again, I thought it was a fine action movie. Granted, I don't know anything about F1. That missed me entirely when it got popular on Netflix during COVID era. And I feel that people who like F1 might have beef with the artistic license that was taken for this movie, but I don't have any of that baggage, and I thought it was pretty much a good time. It's not going to make any favorite lists for me. I didn't love the female representation in this movie either, but outside of that, it's just a really classic sports movie structure. It's a little bit hard to go wrong with that for me. And it's got some really cool filming and some really clever editing to trim down so many races into something so watchable. So I thought that was fascinating to watch and think about. So while I saw Mission Impossible twice in theaters, The Phoenician Scheme is a movie that I saw less than once in theaters. But that's not because I walked out. It's because my theater's projector failed from overheating about 20 to 30 minutes before the movie should have ended. This was a few weeks ago when there was a huge heat wave sweeping over the central and eastern parts of the US, and apparently our local theater did not handle those 100-degree temperatures very well. I got a free movie voucher out of the issue, but I didn't end up finding the time to go back to watch it in the theater. I ended up just reading, the ending on Wikipedia. Not ideal, but I will go watch the ending at some point, just not something I made a priority to go back to the theater for. That said, I thought the movie was pretty good. I laughed out loud several times. It has the Wes Anderson visual style. It's about spiritual reckoning and reconciling with family, and I think my only issue was that I just wasn't very emotionally pulled into it, and I guess that's the theme of this month's set of movies and also the books. I just was sort of reading and watching things that sort of held emotionality at a remove, and I think I just wasn't vibing with that this month. But I'd rewatch it, or at least I'd watch the ending that I ended up reading. Finally, I watched Materialists, directed by Celine Song. I didn't really know what I was getting into with this movie. The trailer played at one of the other movies I went to this month, and I saw Pedro Pascal and Chris Evans, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna go watch that. And the trailer in the first 10 minutes of the movie would have you believe that this was a romantic comedy, but it's really more of a straight drama. Dakota Johnson plays a matchmaker in a love triangle between gazillionaire Pedro Pascal and broke ex-boyfriend Chris Evans, which is wow, that must be tough. But it's a very dialogue-heavy movie. It's an idea-heavy movie that's kind of a modern Jane Austen in the way it discusses the value of people and marriage in contemporary society. But Again, the characters don't really feel real, they feel like types, and when I was reading up on it later, I found out that Celine Song comes from a playwriting background, and that actually kind of like makes the whole style of the movie make more sense to me somehow. But I also read that Past Lives, which was Celine Song's directorial debut, was more compelling. So let me know in the comments if you've watched it and how it compares to Materialists. That is what I read and watched in June. In the comments, I'd love to know what you've been reading and watching, or any opinions on the things I've mentioned in this video. I really appreciate hearing your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.